I don't know if you guys heard that or not, but it said the recording is in progress. I like to start these things myself, not having technology tell me when to start. So here's the official start. Welcome to the Heroic Industries podcast. This is like take number 3 or 4 trying to get this right. So hopefully the audio turns out well on this, because I don't know if it will. Anyway, this is Heroic Industries podcast number 4, I believe. Thanks so much for sticking with us. If you've been here from the start, if you haven't, go back and check out the first 1 through 3 episodes and hopefully learn some stuff. And I don't know, hope you guys have been doing well and training hard and continuing to learn. This is going to sound like an ad. It's not an ad. I wish it were, because that means that people would be paying attention. But I just got done with some really, really good training from TAC Flow Academy. It was a ballistic shield course. And again, it's going to sound like an ad, but it's not an ad. I'm just giving you my assessment of the course I took. If you're in law enforcement, you definitely need to go through this course, especially if you're on any type of tactical element, using ballistic shields, handheld shields, especially in room entry, vehicle assaults, hostage rescue. I've never used one before, and we've never incorporated it in anything I've done a ton, and it was really eye-opening and very, very cool. It's really just a skill that allows you to augment your regular training that you get in the academy, as far as like active shooter response, room entry, assessing angles, all of that. It augments those skills and allows you to do more as far as covering the angles and just a ton of different stuff. The instructors were great. I've been to a number of other trainings in other schools where the instructors, I don't want to say are hit or miss, but a lot of times are very opinionated about their skill set and about what they believe the training should be or could be used for. And they'll basically tell you like, hey, if you're not doing this shit, you're fucked up and you're stupid. And if you ask them questions, they're like, no, anyway. So these instructors, Chris and Rigo, were great. And I don't know about the rest of their staff. I've never taken a class from them before, but really open to like listening and learning as well, which, if you ask me, is the mark of a good instructor. Are they willing to hear their students and use their students to actually improve them as well? So, and that's just a good leadership quality, right? Are you able to be a leader and a follower? And you can lead a class and still follow some of the students, as that you will always learn from the people that are there to learn from you as well. So if you are closed off to that, then you're just kind of arrogant. So don't be that guy or girl. All right. Anyway, so that was a really good class. Check out TAC Flow. They got a pretty good Instagram page, TAC Flow Academy. And then, and I think that's about it. I'm not sure, but their website's okay too. Another thing, we used like some Paraclete shields and stuff like that. They have 0 social media presence, so good luck with that if you're interested in looking at a shield. So anyway, for what it's worth, really good training, new skill sets. Bottom line, moral of the story, continue to develop yourself inside of your craft. And we'll talk more about this in a little bit as we get into the next segments of the show. But continue always to develop yourself. If you feel like you're stagnating, then you are stagnating. If you feel like you're getting bored with, your work, your training, like whatever, if you feel like you're getting bored, that means you're stagnant. That means you need to shake things up a little bit. You need to sign up for a class, go on a trip, like just shit. You gotta rock the boat a little bit. You can't just float. You can't just float. You can't be cool with just floating and just existing. It doesn't work that way, right? You'll get left behind. If you do that, like, you will get left behind for sure, or in our job, in our professions, you'll end up getting hurt, or getting, even worse, getting someone else hurt, right? So don't stagnate, right? And all right, so if you are aware I was asked to be on a podcast. This is what I want to get into a little bit here. I was asked to be on the Follow-Up Question podcast. And really what the scope of that podcast is to show 2 points of view, right? Michael does a really good job with this, former journalist, show 2 points of view. So he will choose one person from one side of a subject and interview them, and one person from the other side of a subject and then interview them, and compare and contrast the points of view. And the goal and scope is to really show that the 2 points of view that seem to be drastically opposing really aren't that far apart, which is really cool. If you think about it from a sociological standpoint, is that there are more differences within populations than between them, right? So what does that show about humanity and human beings and society? Is that we have a lot more in common with each other, especially when we think we don't, especially when you think that's like in-group versus out-group type stuff. That sociology 101, right, will tell you that there are more differences and deviations within a population than between them. So we are all much, much, much more similar than we are different. So anyway, that's the whole scope and stuff. And it is really cool show. Really had fun doing it. And, I was asked to come on, obviously from a law enforcement standpoint, and some takeaways. Obviously this podcast is geared towards cops, right? So not like earth-shattering information, because you guys live it every day, but there's also some of you that are not police officers that I'm sure are listening, and that podcast would be great for you to listen to as well as this one, obviously. But I was asked to come on to share my perspective from the last basically 365 days, the whole summer of love of last year, 2020. Fallout from all the riots and all the hatred and all the violence and the anger and everything that we've been getting basically piled on us over the last year. And if you've been in the job, you know that it's obviously been a total nightmare for a lot of places. Anybody with any city population, anybody that went through any type of riots or civil unrest or whatever you want to call it, I'm going to call it riots because that's what it was. Your life the past year has not gotten simpler or less stressful, and that is putting it mildly, right? So I was asked to come on to give my perspective on that, and then to answer some questions that basically have been getting thrown around throughout the last year. And I won't go into all the detail because you can go and listen to the show, and I'll put the link in the show notes as well. But basically, like, should police be responding to mentally ill or other calls for service that could be handled by a social worker or someone else to that extent? So we talked about that. We talked about the whole concept of defunding the police. So really good conversation. And and then use of force issues. Obviously, like, use of force is always the thing that people want to know about most. So go listen to the show. I'd love to hear some feedback and some assessments on it. And then also listen to the one before it. So I can't remember the guy's name that did the show, but he's basically an advocate for canceling the police, like get rid of the cops. The cops are racist in nature, and all the buzzwords that people that don't want police anymore say. Okay, so you can listen to that, and you can listen to mine, or vice versa, either way. And then you really get a good perspective on both, right? On both. And so let's talk about what I learned from that. All right. And what we all need to learn from that conversation, and the conversation that he had with the anti-police guy, right? Is that there is such a level of like civilian or citizen ignorance as to maybe not what we do as cops, but why we do it. right? Why we take action the way we do, why we move the way we do, why we think the way we do, why we do anything. So there's a level of, and this isn't meant to be rude, or anything like that, but the average citizen doesn't understand or know about case law for use of force. Let's stick with that for just a quick second, because this is one where we all need to be versed in explaining and understanding the concepts of use of force, right? And we have to be able to do that to anybody on the street. All right. So this is a concept known as apologetics, right? So you hear this a lot of times with like religion, like apologetics for like, being Catholic, the Catholic faith, right? Can you explain the church's views to people? Can you be an apologist for that? And that doesn't mean to like apologize. That means to explain. Okay. Can you be an apologist for the church or for the teachings or for whatever, right? We need to be able to do that as police officers. We basically need to be versed in apologetics for police work, and being able to explain the doctrine of how we operate, right? And that means you have to understand, as a police officer, you don't have a choice in this. You have to understand case law, Graham v. Connor, Tennessee versus Garner. You need to know your department policies and procedures for use of force, and inside and out. You need to understand Supreme Court case laws, such as the ones I just mentioned, but also understanding, like Terry v. Ohio. You need to understand exactly what those things say so that you can explain them to people. And then when people say, oh, hey, did you see this video? And they send you a video and they're like, these police are out of line. And then you can explain to them either, well, yes or no, based on the case law. And probably more likely is, well, maybe because of case law and the fact that these things are all completely gray. And that's why there's such a high demand for defense attorneys, is because of all the gray area. Anytime there's a high demand for lawyers, it means that there's a high demand for arguing and going back and forth and debating and then convincing and selling and like all that. That's what lawyers do, right? But why is there such a demand for criminal defense lawyers is because of the fact that this is all very gray, that this case law is not yes or no, 1 or 0, because everything has to be looked at in context, but it has to be based on basic framework. And as police officers, we don't need to be lawyers, but we do have to be able to explain, like, all right, here's what a reasonable police officer would do in this context. Here's what I would think if I were in their shoes, right? And this is reasonable or unreasonable based on that, or based on my assessment of it, which, may or may not be accurate as well, because I wasn't there, right? And then you can kind of like open their eyes to that and explain that, and that will hopefully shed some light on use of force issues when people have questions. But if we can't do that, then it's just going to be more of the same. You know what I mean? And additionally, a side component or a side effect of this is you'll get better at report writing. You'll get better at understanding, like, well, why I had to extract that person from the vehicle and initiate a use of force. Like, why did I have to do that? Other than I didn't feel safe, other than I was nervous, other than, I was triggered sympathetic, right? Or fight or flight, it's got to be more than that. We have to be able to articulate more than that. We have to be able to utilize the case law and the policy and the procedures and all of the doctrine that we operate under in order to be good at our profession. Okay. So that's not an option. Like, you have to do that. Even if you just go as simple as like to Google and Wikipedia and just check Graham v. Connor, Tennessee versus Garner, read up on those Fourth Amendment violations or Fourth Amendment, what the Fourth Amendment says, and how it all operates inside of the context for us, and you'll be better at your job. You'll also be able to further explain to people, family members, friends, whatever, as to why certain officers did certain things at certain times based on your assessment as a third party watching a body camera. Okay. So the level of ignorance for society is pretty big. People don't know those things. They're not taught those things. And when people talk about the talk that they have with their kids, which everyone should have, is really just a basic civics lesson on how to act around police officers, right? But when you have that talk with your kids, you need to explain to them these case laws so they understand exactly what the police can and cannot do, so they're not just guessing, because nobody likes to be stopped and nobody likes to be told what to do, right? Nobody, not you, not me, not a cop, not a citizen, nobody, right? So if you just don't like it and you think, well, because I don't like it, the cops are wrong, you're wrong, probably, right? You can't just play this street defense lawyer stuff and think that, like, well, I didn't like it or I thought it was wrong, but you don't know, right? You don't have any clue because you don't understand the case law. You don't understand what the Fourth Amendment says. You don't understand that we don't need a search warrant for a vehicle due to the fact that it's inherently mobile, right? Or plain view or anything like that, right? If you don't understand that stuff, you don't have a seat at the table to have the conversation. You're too ignorant to the facts, right? And you're just basing everything on feelings. And we talk about that a little bit in the show, that there's no way to glam up use of force. You can't do it, right? It's human violence. It's going to look ugly. It's not a choreographed movie. It's going to look gnarly and violent and bad. And people's emotions kick up and they say, well, that looks terrible. It's like, well, yes, it does. But you need to take your emotions out of the conversation because they don't have a place here, right? They don't have a place here. When somebody gets killed, it makes people sad, regardless of if they were right or wrong, good or bad. It doesn't matter. The actions cause sadness because we have a loss of life. So what you need to do is be able to remove your emotions from the context and look at the facts based on the framework. And then you can make the decision whether it was justified or unjustified, not good or bad, not happy or sad, nothing like that, right? Is it justified or unjustified based on the framework that we operate in? But if you don't understand the framework, you can't have, you don't get to be part of the conversation. So you need to go understand the framework, right? That's what you need to do if you want to start judging use of force. If you want to start judging those things and start talking like a lawyer, you need to understand the rules and the framework that lawyers operate under. Okay. So go check out the episode. Let me know what you think. Like I said, Michael does a great job with that. And check out the other one too. You know what I mean? The anti-police one, right? So, another thing I got out of this was that being able to listen, right? And as law enforcement, if you're a cop listening to this, please pay attention. We need to be able to listen to society, to listen to the other side, and to really open our minds to the fact, like, hey, maybe these changes aren't bad. Maybe some ideas that the other side has aren't bad. And we need to be willing to say, yeah, like, let's give that a shot. Like, going back to the whole notion of, like, should we send social workers to deal with suicidal subjects? I don't know. And that's what we talk about on the show. I have no idea. There will be consequences to things either way, but we have to have the ability to listen and say, okay, well, that sounds like, okay, that's not a bad plan, right? Not inherently, but there are some consequences I can see back and forth. This is how you talk to people. And then you say, okay, well, let's try it. Right. If society really wants something, then maybe you ought to listen a little bit and be like, okay, well, we won't do this anymore, or whatever. Right. So you have to be open to that. Right. But we also need to be able to understand that, listening to other people with opposing views further can be used to solidify who we are, or who you are individually, right? By setting a framework for what you are not, or what you don't want to be. And that's a very good thing too, because a lot of times it's like, you'll ask somebody, and this is like basic goal setting even, is like, what's your goal here? Where do you want to be in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year? Who do you want to be? Who are you trying to become? Right. And people oftentimes don't know. They just don't know. I'm not sure what you mean by that. And if you can take the same conversation from a different angle and say, All right, well, what do you not want to be in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, whatever? Then they can sometimes look at that, and it shifts your mindset. You're like, I don't want to be fat. I don't want to be weak. I don't want to be this helpless person anymore. I don't want those things. Okay, so now we need to put it into different words and figure out, like, what does that mean? What does that look like? So when you're listening, and you got to be able to listen to do this. When you're listening to people with opposing views, it can help to solidify who you are based on the fact that you hear them talk and I don't want to be this. I don't want to sound like this. I don't like these ideas and these concepts. And then it further helps to solidify who you are. But you have to be able to listen, to hear them, and to understand and to empathize, so that you can further make yourself stronger in your own views. So that's one thing I learned by listening to the other podcast, the other side of things. And I actually reached out to that gentleman. Again, I'm not going to mention his name. You can go find that for yourself. But his big thing was longer bridges, bigger tables, and being basically more inclusive. And I told him I really liked the show, because I did. And honestly, a lot of the stuff that we were saying was very, very, very similar. We were just using different ways to explain it, I think, and different ways to get from point A to point B. But what I got from his context and his podcast was the fact that he has a very solid drive for life over death, right? Building a culture of life, and views the police department as basically a culture of death. And I would disagree with that a lot, but I liked a lot of his points on things. So we were talking about a lot of the same things in different ways, but his whole thing about, and again, that shows, sociologically, like, we have much more in common with each other than we do differences, if you're willing to listen, and truly empathize. But if you're not, then we're stuck in this karmic loop, right? Over and over and over again, we're going to repeat the same cycles. Okay. So you got to listen and empathize, but truly listen and truly empathize. And if you don't do that, then, like I said, nothing's going to change. But anyway, so his thing that he goes on to about, being more inclusive and building bridges and that kind of stuff. And, so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to reach out and extend a hand and tell him that I like the show, and, build a bridge. And the response I got was less than enthusiastic. So he thanked me for reaching out and said, maybe he'll reach out again in the future. And that was pretty much it. So it wasn't hateful, but it definitely wasn't interested. It was very, very, very much like, yeah, you're getting the brush off, which, whatever. But you've got to do that too. And that's the last thing that I learned about this podcast was, you have to be willing to reach out. You have to be willing to extend a hand, build a bridge with no expectations. And I wasn't, I'll be honest, I had a little bit of expectations with that, and maybe he'll reach out in the future. Who knows? But you have to be able to reach out and say, hey, I'm here to help if you need anything. And if they tell you fuck off, they tell you fuck off. It's not like, you tried. All right. You tried. And you can't stress out over other people. You can't stress out over what they do. You have no control over that. The only thing you have control over is who you are and how you respond. So that's the last thing. Extend a hand with no expectations. Don't get shitty at people because they slap your hand away. Hey, that's their choice. They can do that or not. They can learn or not. That's up to them. And they're on their own journey to seek truth. And that's it. All right. That's it. So, all right. I guess I lied. That's not the last thing. So the big takeaway that I got from moving forward from doing that podcast is the fact that being professional and being able to be an apologist for police work, right, makes you more professional. Because society right now is demanding perfection, right? Body cameras, camera footage of everything we do. Anytime you go on a run, you are on camera, probably 3 different angles, minimum 3 different angles. If you're wearing a camera, you got one in your car, you've got at least one on the street that's pointed at you. I can guarantee you that. At least one cell phone from a human being, and then probably 3 or 4 other cameras that you have no idea that are there, from surveillance footage, gas stations, ring cameras, you name it. We are living in Big Brother right now. So, and forever, like, this is not going away. This genie does not go back in the bottle. You cannot go back to 1984 and have like a rotary phone anymore. Like, this is not where we're going ever. So the fact that you have to be professional is an understatement. And the fact that society is demanding perfection, which is somewhat unrealistic, like a lot unrealistic, but it doesn't change the fact that you need to really strive to be professionally perfect, right? And that means to know your profession, but that also means to be able to perform, right? And stay calm and make good decisions, like we've talked about at length, and we'll continue to talk about at length. And that means to be in shape, right? You have to be able to be in shape to buffer out the stress, to be strong in who you are and what you're doing and how you're doing it, and being able to deal with all the shit that comes with it. You have to be strong in mind, body, and spirit, in everything, right? So be professional. And in a time when the demands are higher than ever, you have to step up to the plate, and you've got to continue. Like I said right at the beginning, you have to be able to not stagnate, right? Not stagnate. So you have to be setting goals. You have to be seeking improvement in every different aspect of your being, right? So with that said, let's talk about strength. All right. One of the main movements inside of the heroic industries framework, right, for tactical athletes, is deadlifting, right? We've talked about get ups. We talked about, traversing movements, running, carries, drags, that kind of stuff. Made major things with this, right? But as far as like traditional strength movement, deadlifting is critical. I would even, like the whole adage that that's, a squat is the king of all movements, of all lifts. Yeah, whatever. I mean, you can make an argument for that for sure. Systemic loading, range of motion, all of those things. Yeah, you could probably make an argument for that that is the most important human movement that we do is a squat. Yeah, okay. For a tactical athlete, where you're wearing a little turtle shell, depending if soft armor or hard plates or whatever, duty belt, like weapon systems, you're wearing all this crap. So your range of motion is majorly restricted. All right. I would make the argument that deadlifting might be more important, right? And in the grand scheme of things, you really can't categorize one more important than the other. You have to have, you have to be able to squat, and you have to be able to pull, right, to do deadlifts. So from that standpoint, I mean, you can have arguments that are cyclic in nature about which is more important, but it really doesn't matter. But deadlifting is a critical skill to have. And really, what is it, right? What is deadlift? A deadlift is simply lifting shit up off the ground. That's it, right? And think about it from standpoint of what we do on the job. Is we have to pick things up off the ground regularly. We have to pick up objects. We have to, and it's usually before moving them from point A to point B, going back to the carries being so important. But what do you got to do before you can carry anything? You got to be able to pick it up, right? And you have to be able to pick it up safely. You have to be able to pick it up from an odd angle. You have to be able to pick up an odd object, and you have to be able to do it quickly, right? So deadlifting is critical, right? Deadlifting, just picking crap up off the ground. All right. So let's talk about, screen share this. Okay, so let's talk about practical application. Now, this is an extreme example, and the video is not great, but I'll kind of narrate as we go. But I'll just kind of let it flow. Come here, buddy. So if you can see, this is an officer's body camera of an overturned vehicle, right? So it's an accident with a party pinned. So you can hear him say her head's pinned. Now you can kind of get the idea and the gist of what happens from here. Okay. Can you find anything, ma'am? Is your head clear? Okay, so like you said, his camera is obstructed because his chest is against the car and it's dark out, and he basically like used the car to leverage into, I think, like a tire, which lifting a tire is really just a deadlift. It's a different kind of deadlift, but it's still just a deadlift. So he basically levered into that, pushed into it, picked it up, or cleared just enough so that he could get this woman's head out from underneath a car, right? So he deadlifted it, right? He deadlifted a part of a car. He clearly didn't like flip it over like a movie or something crazy like the Incredible Hulk. That would have been really cool. However, that this was a deadlift. This shows you the extreme example of what you need to be able to do should the demands be placed on you to do it. Had he not been able to move this vehicle, there's a high likelihood that this lady would have not survived, right? So that's a deadlift, picking things up off the ground. That is exactly what happened here. And if you don't have that ability, or you've never tried to do it on your own, then you're probably not even going to try to do it. You're going to wait for equipment. You're going to wait for the fire department. You're going to wait for more help before you even try. And that could mean the difference between, moving it or not. So practical application. All right. So now let's go over, some variations and how to train this, because deadlifting is something that people are often scared to do because they don't want to get hurt. Understandably so. Because if you're lifting barbells, then, that is a higher risk movement, especially if you're going heavy and you don't know how to do it. And there's a reason that deadlifting is a powerlifting movement. And there's a reason that even the strongest powerlifters on the planet at Westside Barbell, when you look at the conjugate system, the way that they do things, they pull heavy, deadlift heavy once every 3 weeks. Or once every third week, right, is a lower body pull day. So they do twice as much volume squatting as they do deadlifting. The demands on your central nervous system are much, much higher for deadlifting than they are for squatting. So the amount of time it takes to recover between sessions is greater. So you need to be able to understand that when you're looking at deadlifting. But there are many ways that you can train deadlifting that's not barbell based and not maximal loading based, but is still going to give you the skill set you need to be able to do this job well, right? So let's take a look at some of those. All right. So here I'm demoing a little sandbag deadlift, right? So you can see that this is obviously not a 1 rep max, right? This is just a basic conventional deadlift with a sandbag. It's just, you can see the angles, hinge pattern, chest and shoulders over the bag. And here's one from the side, shins staying relatively straight, loading the hamstrings, and just up and down. That's basically it. Now at the top there, that's something you really got to look at for regardless of how you're deadlifting, is you can see that my ribs are locked down and my glutes are squeezed. So that it's basically like if you put me on the floor flat, right, then you would have basically a plank position. Okay. So a lot of times people want to like get their shoulders behind, especially with a barbell, which is really, don't do that. Because if you really try to throw your shoulders back and not drive your hips through, it unlocks your spine. Like it just kind of opens things up. And that's when you get hurt, right? But if you look here at the top, everything is stacked, right? Everything here is stacked. Knees are locked out, hips are locked out, shoulders are right behind the implement, whatever that is here, and good to go with that. So that can be loaded heavy if you can lock things in, maintain the same shape, and then lock it out of the top. Okay, so that is with a sandbag, and that's a conventional deadlift with really anything from the front. Now, something you need to look at too is from a risk reward standpoint that this is a 75-pound sandbag, so not very heavy, but the more that the implement is out in front of your body, the harder it's going to be to keep your spine from curling over. Okay, so that's why when you deadlift, you want that bar or that implement to be right against your shins so that you can maintain a good spinal position as you stand up. So it's dragging right up the shins to lock out. Okay, so deadlift's got to do that. All right, so now we're looking at a single leg variation of the same thing. So you can see that the balance demands are greater. It's going to be much more specialized for like glutes and hamstrings, and you've got the balance component and the open chain movement as well. All right, so now we're talking about a suitcase deadlift, I believe, which is really just that, right? You just place the implement. Here I'm using a kettlebell. You could use a sandbag. You can use a barbell, right? But you just place it on your side and then bend down and pick it up just like a suitcase. And you can see at the bottom right there, you can see that, you can keep your hips a little bit higher because the implement's being placed basically right in your center of gravity. So if you put that right next to your foot, it's easier to keep your posterior chain engaged because of the fact that it is further towards your midline and not away from your body, not away from your midline. The further, like I said, the further away from your midline it is, the harder it is to maintain a good back angle and good posterior chain engagement. And then lock out at the top looks the same every time. All right, so this is a crossbody deadlift. This is where we start talking about different angles and really making sure that we can deadlift from strange angles. So you can see reach across, boom. So now it's going to be loading differently. It's still an open chain. Well, not really. It's a closed chain movement, but it's really isolating one side, right? But it's getting out of that linear plane where everything is like up and down and forward and back, right? Especially when you look at CrossFit. CrossFit's got a really hard time of breaking out of linear ranges of motion. And this is a great way to do it, either in a warm-up prior to deadlifting, or as a prehab based movement, and accessory work after. But you can see that you're turning and moving in a transverse plane or like a diagonal plane all the way across. So it's going to activate your obliques differently, your glutes differently, your lats differently, because you have to pull the lat and the chest differently in order to do that. All right. Okay, so this one is, well, and with that crossbody deadlift, you can use dumbbells, kettlebells, sandbags. You can use any implement you want. Same is true of all this stuff. You can use any implement you really want, especially with accessory work, right? All right, so here is a sumo stance. You can see my feet are outside my shoulders, and this is going to be still a hinge pattern, right? Because we're deadlifting is all hinging. All right. But you're going to see some good things and some bad things here. So feet are outside the shoulders, still a hinge pattern, still posterior chain engagement. Hips are going to be breaking first backwards. And the wider you go, the more glute based and hip based that the movement's going to be, right? The tighter you go, it's going to change things a little bit. From squat standpoint, it's going to make it a little bit more quad based. From a pulling standpoint, conventional deadlift, the narrower your feet are, the more hamstrings and maybe lower back you're going to get into it. So here we're going to get a lot more glutes out of the movement. All right, so you can watch this. All right, so you can see feet are outside the shoulders. I'm trying to keep my chest as upright as possible. And then from there, tension and stand. And you're still locking out the same. Now, if you watch the descent here, good, right there. I'm keeping everything relatively upright. I'm trying to keep my chest as upright as possible, drive my knees out, and basically like shift back slightly to get in my glutes and hamstrings, but then really go elevator down, right? And you'll see the breakdown in the movement and my mobility limitations right about here. As soon as I play this, you're going to see my chest articulate forward a little bit more than I would like, right? So if the more I can stay upright, the more I can like elevator down, the more I can stay into my glutes and really stretch out my hips. So you can watch my chest drop right now. There it is. Boom. And then I have to basically do a little mini back extension. See that? Chest forward. And then I have to do like a mini back extension in order to get up out of that. So not a big deal with a kettlebell, right? Because you're probably not going to feel it. And that's like a 44 or 53 pounder that I was using just for demos. But if I were to make that a barbell and I were to load that for a 3 rep max or a 1 rep max or something like that, that little back extension is going to be not what I want in order to lift the most weight and to protect my back. I don't want to be pulling from the ground with my back. So what I would say to myself is that you need to work on your hips. You need to work on your inner hamstrings. You need to work on your adductors, all that kind of stuff so that you can add the mobility where you need to in that end range motion. All right. And then also you can work on different ranges of motion within deadlifting. So that's something we'll talk about here in a second as well. A little chest forward, no good. Okay. All right. So this is when I talk about changing the ranges of motion within a deadlift. All right. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. You can increase range of motion by doing what we're doing here, is standing on 4 mats, right? 4 3/4 inch mats. So this is, a deficit deadlift, right? So here you can see the bar is rather than mid shin where you would start off the floor. This is going to be, at about ankle range. All right. So it's going to be a deeper pull, a longer pull as you move through range of motion on things. So check it out. All right. So with this, you can see that these are touch and go reps. So I'm basically trying to do a high volume finisher here. This is the last set of several sets, but you see it's a big range of motion and about 5 inches longer than where a normal deadlift would be, and that really tears your hands up, right? So with that said, you can also increase the range of motion longer, but you can decrease the range of motion and actually work on overloading a little bit differently or doing some different things, because you can shorten it up. You can also do rack pulls or block pulls, so you can set the weights up higher and make it so you're just working lockout. So if we go back to that sumo deadlift where I said my chest was coming too forward and that I was missing some end range with that. So if you have somebody or you are somebody that lacks end range ability on that, don't force it. You can just make the range shorter by lifting the weight up with a set of spotter arms, with some plates, with some mats. You put those underneath the weights. That makes the pull shorter, and then you get yourself a block pull or a rack pull, and it allows you to still do the hinging movement without the risk of that last range of motion, that last extreme range of motion that you're working on, right? But the trick is to identify and understand, do I have this or do I not, right? Do I have this range of motion or do I not? Can I do this lift safely or can I not? And without doing some video analysis, like video analysis sounds really fancy, without videoing yourself and having somebody look at it that knows what they're doing, you're not going to know, right? So like, you don't know what you don't know. You might think it looks amazing. I've had squats where I'm like, man, that felt great. And you watch a video and you're like, that was dog shit. So really understanding if you can do it or if you can't. And how do you do that? Well, you need somebody that knows what the hell they're looking at, And that can help you with the process of getting through this stuff, right? Especially when you talk about like a high risk movement or a more high risk movement like barbells. If you don't know, there's some technique to it. It's not just like load the bar up and rip it off the floor. You got to know how to move it a little bit. And if you do know how to move it, you got to know how to move it better so you can lift more weight and you can get stronger. Okay. So with that said, the Heroic Network allows you to do just that, right? So you can do a video. You can get a program, right? So the program comes with the network. Everybody gets access to that. And then with that, you can post videos, you can ask questions. We've got a whole network. It's basically our own little Facebook page that's inside of our own private network. So we don't have to get distracted by all the social media bullshit. So check the link. And if you want a free fitness program and you want a free network of support, cops, like military, tactical athletes that are already in this program that can help you. I'm in the network all the time, answering questions and watching videos and posting videos and all that kind of stuff. Just get signed up. Link is in the notes and in the bio, and get after it. All right. So that said, that's your assessment of deadlifts. That's kind of like follow up on the follow-up question, and check that one out too. All the stuff will be in the notes. And till next time, guys, live heroic.